I thought I was planning a wedding. Turns out I was the asset. He wanted my land, my silence, my name. But all he left me with was a diamond necklace meant for someone else. So I turned the engagement party into a reckoning. And as his empire burned, I realized something. Sometimes the fire doesn't just destroy. It reveals what was worth saving. Like me. I wasn't looking for anything more than a charger. That's the part that makes it feel cruel. How something so mundane could unravel the entire tapestry of my life. I was in Marcus's home office, the one with the glass desk and walnut-paneled walls, designed to scream wealth without ever needing to raise its voice. My phone was at 2% and I had a video call in 10 minutes. Simple task. Grab the spare charger from the drawer he told me I could use. But instead of the bottom drawer, I opened the top one. A velvet box lay nestled beneath a neat stack of passport copies, bank slips and architectural sketches. I almost missed it. Almost. But curiosity or instinct or fate, I don't know which, made me reach for it. The box was heavy in my hand, heavier than it had any right to be. I opened it. Inside was a necklace that looked like it belonged in a museum display. Diamonds shaped like teardrops, delicate and deliberate, suspended from a platinum chain that shimmered with quiet violence. But it wasn't the diamonds that made my stomach twist. It was the engraving. Vivien. A single name, etched in elegant cursive on the back of the clasp. Not mine. Not even close. I stared at it for a long time, as if the letters might rearrange themselves if I waited long enough. They didn't. They stayed still. Permanent. My hand trembled. 5 years together. 6 months engaged. 3 weeks from our wedding. And he bought a diamond necklace for someone named Vivien. Olivia. Marcus's voice floated from downstairs, casual and confident. Did you find the charger? I blinked, adrenaline lashing through me like ice water. I snapped the box shut and shoved it into the drawer. Not yet, I called back, somehow managing not to choke. Try the bottom drawer, he replied. Might be in there. Of course. You wouldn't want me snooping in the top one. I slid the drawer closed with a soft click. Somehow it sounded like a gunshot in my ears. That night we had dinner by candlelight like nothing had changed. Technically nothing had. Not yet. No fights, no confessions, no explosions. Just the soft hum of classical music in the background, sushi from my favorite place downtown, and Marcus pouring wine like the perfect fiancé. Long day? He asked, watching me over the rim of his glass. I nodded, smiling faintly. Lots of meetings at the gallery. He reached across the table, fingers brushing the ring on my left hand. 3 carats. Family heirloom. It glittered under the crystal chandelier above us. You're quiet tonight, he said. Just tired. His eyes flicked down to his phone, half hidden under the edge of the table. I watched him carefully. The man across from me was 34, polished and articulate with the kind of career people wrote magazine articles about. He'd been on Financial Monthly's 30 Under 30 list 4 years ago. His smile had charmed investors, CEOs, my mother, even the doorman downstairs. And he'd charmed me too, or at least the version of me that still believed in him. I tilted my head. My sister called today. His thumb paused over his phone. Oh yeah. She's excited about her birthday dinner next week. There was a beat of silence. She said you hadn't sent her anything yet, I added softly. I thought maybe you were planning something special. Marcus blinked. Confusion flickered, not panic, not guilt. Just a delay, like his brain needed time to load the correct response. I am, he said quickly. You know I like surprises. He didn't have a sister. After dinner, I cleared the plates while Marcus took a work call in the living room. He spoke in a low voice, the kind he used when discussing important things. I didn't listen in. Not tonight. Not yet. I wiped down the counter slowly, methodically. My hands moved on autopilot, but my mind was spinning. Vivien. I didn't recognize the name. I'd never heard him mention her. Not once in 5 years. That, more than anything, made my skin crawl. You don't hide gifts for acquaintances in velvet boxes. You don't engrave the name of someone insignificant in precious metal. And you don't bury it under a pile of documents like a secret you hope stays buried forever. Marcus laughed softly in the other room. The sound made my stomach turn. Later, I lay in bed with a book in my lap and 1,000 thoughts in my head. Marcus was in the shower, steam rolling under the bathroom door. I stared at the pages in front of me and saw nothing. I didn't cry. There was no dramatic sob, no hands over my face, no broken down monologue into a mirror. Just stillness. Heavy, quiet stillness. Because when you lose your footing on a cliffside, there's no time to scream. Only instinct. Something had shifted. Not everything. Not yet. But enough. When Marcus returned, towel draped around his neck, he smiled at me like he always did. Long week. Ready for the honeymoon. I looked up. Absolutely, I said, closing the book. We deserve a break. He leaned down and kissed my forehead. I don't know what I'd do without you. I smiled. Neither do I. That night I didn't sleep much. I listened to his breath beside me, even and steady, while mine was shallow and restless. I stared at the ceiling and let the silence cradle me, wrapping itself around my spine like armor. I didn't know yet what I would find. I didn't know her last name or how long this had been going on, or what else he was hiding. But I would find out. He had started something when he placed that necklace in the drawer. He just didn't know it yet. I didn't look at the necklace again the next morning. I didn't have to. Once you've seen something clearly, no amount of blinking makes it disappear. Marcus kissed my cheek as he left for work, his cologne still clinging to my sweater. Don't forget your final fitting tomorrow, he said. And check with the florist. Vivien mentioned delays with the calla lilies. I kept my smile in place barely. Calla lilies. Vivien. The name settled into the space behind my ribs like a splinter I couldn't dig out. I watched him leave, the front door clicking shut like the lid of a trap. Then I locked it and slid to the floor, fingers trembling. I didn't have proof. Not yet. But something inside me, something instinctive and old and bone deep, had already shifted. The kind of shift you don't recover from. The kind that turns suspicion into certainty. That night I waited until Marcus fell asleep. His breath was soft and rhythmic beside me, chest rising and falling in perfect time. I stared at the ceiling, counting the seconds, then slowly reached across him to the nightstand. His phone was exactly where I hoped it would be. Face down. Charging. Unlocked with my birthday. He never changed it. I held my breath and opened his messages. The screen lit up with conversations I wasn't supposed to see. Vivien was first. At the top of the list. And, Vivien, he's pushing the zoning board again. Just make sure she doesn't back out. Marcus, don't worry. The situation is under control. Vivien, does she suspect anything? Marcus, she's too focused on the wedding. It's the perfect timing. Vivien, once the papers are signed, we're free. Finally. The situation. That was me. I was the situation. I scrolled further. Photos of lake house weekends. Matching wine glasses. Her feet on his lap. Him in the robe I gave him last Christmas. Locations time-stamped during his work trips. My stomach turned. Another thread, this one labeled G. Reynolds, caught my eye. Gerald, the Miller parcel is holding everything up. We can't break ground until we secure that land. Marcus, wedding's on track. I'll handle the transfer through joint accounts after the ceremony. Gerald, you've done well. Just make sure her mother doesn't complicate things. Miller. That name. My name. I froze. Miller was my family's land. The only thing we had left after the accident. My father's garden. The house my mother still lived in. The same property Marcus had once casually suggested she sell. Too big for her to manage, he'd said. Wouldn't it be better for her to be somewhere safe? Comfortable. Now it made sense. It had never been about her comfort. It had always been about access. I sat on the edge of the bed, phone in my hand, stomach hollow. Vivien Reynolds. The name hit me like a blunt force to the temple. She wasn't just the other woman. She was his daughter, Gerald Reynolds, CEO of Reynolds Development. The same man whose negligence had caused the industrial accident that killed my father and left my mother permanently disabled. I remembered the headlines. Malfunction blamed for Site 27 collapse. Reynolds Development offers condolences, no responsibility. Survivors protest dismissed lawsuit. Worker's widow receives $15,000 settlement. I was 16. I had to quit art school and come home to take care of my mother. My world shattered, and they had walked away untouched. Now the same family wanted the last piece of us. And Marcus? He was their inside man. My fiancé. My betrayer. The betrayal didn't feel like fire. It felt like ice. Cold. Expansive. Creeping. I sat there in the dark for what felt like hours. The room was silent but filled with ghosts. Of promises, of my father, of a life I thought was mine. Marcus stirred beside me, murmuring something in his sleep. I watched him for a long moment. Then I quietly stood, walked to my office and opened my journal. It wasn't just a diary anymore. It was now going to be evidence. I began writing down everything. The necklace. The messages. The name. The emails. The conversations I remembered. About my mother, about the property, about zoning laws he claimed to know nothing about. My hands stopped shaking the moment I wrote the first line. He calls me darling while plotting to steal my mother's home. I didn't confront him the next morning. I made his coffee, kissed his cheek and asked if he wanted chicken or salmon for dinner. He chose salmon. Of course. As he left for the day, I waved from the front door, then closed it behind him and locked it with a quiet click. And then I pulled out my laptop. If Marcus thought I was just some delicate ornament to be shifted into position for real estate gain, he'd forgotten who raised me. My father once taught me how to paint drywall with the same hands he used to build our house. He said you could tell what a person valued by what they tried to cover. I'd spent years learning how to make ugly things look beautiful. Now it was time to do the opposite. That evening Marcus came home with roses. White ones. My least favorite. But the ones Vivien had posted on her social media last week. He must have mixed us up again. I accepted them with a kiss and said, "You're too good to me." He laughed. "You bring out the best in me." I smiled carefully. By now I knew better. I didn't bring out the best in him. I brought out the truth. And he'd been hiding it for years. The next night, I installed an encrypted folder on my laptop and started screen recording every session. I photographed every receipt I found in his pockets. From restaurants I'd never eaten at, hotels I'd never heard of, weekends I never knew he took. I traced wire transfers between his accounts and a shell corporation named Marvin Estates LLC. I looked up the name. The legal address matched a Reynolds Development branch office. He wasn't just planning to take my land. He was planning to flip it. Profit from it. Marry me, drain me, discard me. And Vivien? She was the prize on the other side. So I said nothing. When he brought up pushing the wedding date up, why wait when we're already so in love? I pretended to consider it. When he suggested we draft a will just in case, I nodded thoughtfully and made a note in my journal. When he kissed my forehead and called me his forever, I smiled through the nausea. He didn't know. He didn't know what I was building while he was trying to bury me. On Sunday morning, I sat in the garden outside our building, staring at my reflection in a cup of black coffee. My rings sparkled in the sunlight. I turned it slowly. It wasn't mine anymore. It had never really been. I looked up as Marcus stepped outside with a tray of croissants. He smiled like the man I'd once agreed to marry. But now all I could see was someone who underestimated me. Someone who didn't realize he'd handed me every match, every spark, every ounce of fuel I'd need to burn it all down. Not yet. Not today. But soon. Wearing a lie gets easier with practice. I used to think people who stayed in toxic relationships were weak. But now I know, it takes strength to smile at the man plotting to steal from you. To pour him coffee and ask about his day while knowing every word he says is wrapped in deceit. It takes even more strength not to smash everything in sight. But I wasn't going to give him the satisfaction of seeing me break. I was going to let him think he'd won. Until I burned his kingdom down from the inside. I wore the dresses Marcus liked. Soft colors, cinched waistlines, no loud patterns. He had opinions about everything. My shoes, my lipstick, even the way I styled my hair. Loose waves, Olivia. You look more feminine like that. I used to comply because I thought it meant he noticed me. Now I did it because I wanted him to notice nothing else. We had dinner with the Westlakes that week. Major investors in his firm. I smiled, nodded, told stories about our honeymoon plans. Marcus wrapped his arm around my chair like I was a prized possession. When they asked about the wedding venue, I gushed about the Reynolds Hotel downtown. The one Vivien's family owns? Mrs. Westlake asked, raising a brow. Marcus tensed. Yes. Small world. I leaned my head on his shoulder. He's close to them. Especially Vivien. He laughed. The couple chuckled politely. I just sipped my wine and let the silence bloom. The next day, I met Emma at an out-of-the-way cafe in the East Village. We'd been roommates in undergrad, back when she was an aspiring journalist with red eyeliner and a defiant middle finger for every professor who underestimated her. Now she ran exposés that made CEOs sweat, and I knew she was the only one I could trust. "I need your help," I said the moment I slid into the booth. She blinked, then leaned in. "This about Marcus?" I nodded. She tapped her fingers on the tabletop. "You want to leave him?" I shook my head. "Not yet. I want to take everything he's built and turn it into ashes." Emma grinned. "Now we're talking." I laid out the basics. The necklace, the texts, the emails. I didn't tell her everything. Not yet. But enough to see the fire catch in her eyes. "I knew something was off about him," she muttered, scrolling through the screenshots I'd forwarded. "He's too polished. Too curated. Turns out so is his entire life." Emma looked up. "You need someone who understands the legal side of this. The kind of person who doesn't just know the law, but knows how to use it like a weapon." I already had a name in mind. Enter Zara Patel. We met in law school. I'd lasted one semester before switching to art history, but she'd stayed the course and become one of the city's sharpest corporate lawyers. We hadn't spoken in years, but when I called, she picked up on the second ring. "Olivia. I need you." She didn't ask why. "Text me the address." The three of us met that evening in Emma's apartment. No security cameras, no doormen, no risk of Marcus finding out. I opened my laptop and showed them everything. The text messages between Marcus and Vivien. The emails about my mother's land. The financial transfers. The shell companies. The prenup draft with clauses that would cut me out completely after marriage. Emma's jaw clenched. "He was going to marry you, get access to the property, and then replace you." Zara didn't say anything for a while. She was already taking notes. After a few minutes, she looked up. "This isn't just personal betrayal. It's white-collar crime. Wire fraud. Deception with intent to defraud. We're looking at possible jail time if we build it right." The words hit me like a jolt of oxygen. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't paranoid. I was right. At home I continued the act. I laughed at Marcus's jokes. I let him pick the cake flavors. I said things like, "I can't wait to be Mrs. Wellington," while imagining his mugshot on the news. I set voice recorders in the drawer under my makeup. I synced his laptop to my external drive. Every document he left open became another piece of kindling. He had no idea. If anything, he seemed more relaxed than ever, like he believed everything was going according to plan. "You've been amazing lately," he said one night, pulling me into his arms after dinner. "It means everything." "Of course," I murmured. "I just want this to be perfect." "I've been thinking," he continued. "Maybe we should move the wedding up." "Why wait? We could get married in a small ceremony next month, then do a bigger celebration later." I tilted my head. "You're sure?" "Completely. I've never been more certain about anything." I told Emma and Zara the next day. "He's accelerating," Zara said. "He wants that property under his control before anything derails." Emma leaned back. "So we use that. Make him believe he's got you wrapped around his finger. And then?" I asked. Emma smiled. "Then we start pulling strings." Over the next few days I made myself indispensable. I drafted vendor lists, redesigned the seating chart, sent thank you baskets to the Reynolds family, all with calculated sweetness. I let Vivien believe I was just the oblivious fiancée. I even sent her a personalized invitation for the engagement party. "You're such a gracious bride," Marcus said. "I just want to make sure everyone is included," I replied. He nodded, his eyes warm. "You're the best thing that's ever happened to me." I smiled at him from across the table. My rings sparkled in the candlelight. He lifted his glass to toast. I lifted mine too, and in my mind I was already building the fire. "You have no idea. The key," Zara said, scribbling on a napkin, "is to give him something he can't resist. Greed is predictable. It makes people stupid." We were at Emma's apartment again. Third meeting this week. Curtains drawn. Phones off. Zara was in court heels and a blazer, legs folded beneath her on the couch like this was her living room. Emma sat on the floor, cross-legged, a spreadsheet open on her laptop. I hovered near the kitchen island, holding a coffee I couldn't bring myself to sip. "Something believable," Emma added, "but not too obvious. It can't scream setup." "What if we plant a survey?" I asked slowly. Something that makes the land look more valuable than he thought? Zara raised an eyebrow. Like a mineral find? I nodded. Silver. Or lithium. Something just rare enough to stir panic in a developer's mind. Emma's grin was wicked. Now we're talking. By the next morning we had it. A 10-page fabricated geological report drafted by Zara's friend, a geotechnical consultant who owed her a favor. It looked official. Red like gold. It declared that recent sample testing on the Miller property revealed elevated trace elements consistent with subterranean mineral deposits. It would make Marcus and Gerald Reynolds foam at the mouth. All I had to do was make it look like an accident. That afternoon, while Marcus was at work, I placed the document carefully on the desk in our shared home office. I left it under a pile of wedding contracts just barely peeking out. Enough to catch his eye. Enough to make him think I hadn't noticed it was there. Then I went into the kitchen and waited. When he came home, he kissed my cheek and headed toward the office to drop his briefcase. Pause. The rustle of papers. Silence. Then, Olivia. His voice sounded casual, but I could hear the sharpness behind it. What's this? I walked in, feigning surprise. What's what? He held up the report. Did you see this? Oh, that. One of the assistants at the gallery gave it to me. Her boyfriend's in geology or something. Said it might be useful for artists interested in earth materials. I smiled. Blinked. Tilted my head like a curious child. Marcus stared at the pages for a long time. This says your family's land might be sitting on something valuable. Really? I crossed my arms. I thought it was just old trees and broken sprinklers. He didn't laugh. His eyes flicked back to the paper. I could practically see the calculations running through his mind. That night he was unusually affectionate. We had wine with dinner. He massaged my shoulders while I worked on wedding RSVPs. Around 11:30 he pulled me into the living room, arms wrapping around my waist. I've been thinking, he murmured, his breath warm against my neck. Your mom's place is too much for her. Maybe we should talk to her again. Get her into a community where she can be cared for. I kept my voice soft. You think so? I know you love that house, but she's alone out there. What if something happens? She has a nurse. You hired her, remember? Marcus smiled. But she could have more. You and we could help her. I let silence hang for a moment. Let him believe he was convincing me. Finally I nodded. Hey, maybe we can bring it up next week. He exhaled like he'd won a battle. That's my girl. The next morning he brought me breakfast in bed. Egg white omelette. Fresh juice. The newspaper. You're spoiling me, I said. You deserve it. He placed a tiny box on my lap. Also, I confirmed the honeymoon booking. I opened it. A key card, not to our honeymoon suite but to the Reynolds Hotel penthouse. Of course. He claimed it was for us. But I knew better. Emma had already confirmed the guest registry from their system. Mr. and Mrs. Marcus Wellington. Guest, Vivien Reynolds. Check-in, 5 days after our wedding. The sheer confidence. The arrogance. The timeline was airtight, or so he thought. That evening he gave me another gift. A miniature architectural model of a luxury home. Our future, he said, eyes shining. I thought we could build it on your family's land. Something beautiful. Something modern. I traced the tiny porch. The glass-paneled doors. The wraparound patio. It's perfect, I said softly. And I meant it. It was the perfect stage for his downfall. The next day I had a meeting with Emma and Zara at a corner booth in a quiet rooftop bar. Emma pulled out her tablet. He opened the geological report 10 times. Forwarded it to Gerald Reynolds once. It's moving fast. Zara sipped her drink. He's prepping for a deal. The contract on your mother's land will be drawn up soon. I leaned back, listening. My heart didn't race anymore. This wasn't adrenaline. It was control. I want the engagement party to be the stage, I said finally. Let's make it public. Devastating. Irrefutable. Emma smiled. We'll need a video screen, a speech, and maybe a few hidden cameras. Zara added, and legal documentation. If Marcus tries to deflect, I want law enforcement waiting outside. We all nodded. Game on. That night Marcus held me close in bed, whispering about honeymoons and custom floors and how he was lucky to have found me. "You're not like anyone else," he said. "No," I whispered, staring at the ceiling. "I'm not." After he fell asleep, I padded quietly to the study and opened the glass cabinet where he'd placed the house model. I stared at it for a long moment. The tiny pool. The manicured hedges. The illusion of a perfect life. I reached down and gently turned it so that the miniature living room faced me. And I whispered, "Perfect. It's all falling into place." There was something strangely comforting about the routine of a lie. The predictable rhythm of breakfast kisses, wine-drenched dinners, and ivory-colored invitation envelopes with our names etched in gold. I let it all continue, flawless and untouched, while the foundation beneath us turned to ash. Marcus was in peak performance mode. The doting fiancé. The attentive partner. The man who'd made enough appearances at charity galas and political fundraisers to earn a dedicated photo wall in the local lifestyle section. And I was the perfect accessory. I wore the gowns. Smiled for cameras. Hosted bridal brunches. Sat through tastings and fittings and venue walkthroughs with designers who called me Mrs. Wellington before I had the legal right to correct them. All the while, my phone buzzed silently in my purse. Updates from Emma and Zara feeding my private archive like ammunition stacked in a hidden cellar. The engagement party was Marcus's idea, naturally. "It'll be a great way to celebrate before the wedding," he said one evening, pouring champagne into our flutes. "Get the press in, investors, donors. It'll be a moment." A moment, I thought, swirling my glass. Yes, it will. We chose the Skyline Terrace, a rooftop venue that overlooked the city like it owned it. All glass, chrome and fairy lights. Marcus spared no expense, not because of romance but because appearances were his currency. "Let's go big," he said. "Classic elegance. Nothing too sentimental." "Of course," I agreed, brushing my fingers against his. He kissed my hand. I memorized the way he looked at me, not with love but with pride, like a man admiring his investment. Behind the scenes I worked just as hard. With Zara's help, I opened new personal bank accounts, ones Marcus didn't know existed, and moved my assets. Every paycheck. Every savings bond. Even my retirement fund. She also filed a quiet claim through a trust on my mother's property, shielding it from third-party acquisitions, especially from anyone I might marry. Marcus had no idea. He was too busy playing chess with people he thought were pawns. The final piece of my plan required something subtle. A performance within the performance. So I invited Vivien to lunch. We met at Maison Blanche, the kind of upscale boutique cafe she would never say no to. I'd booked the reservation under the pretense of discussing her contributions to the floral arrangements for the engagement party. Vivien arrived 10 minutes late, dressed in a silk blouse and oversized sunglasses, carrying the scent of something French and expensive. She sat down without apology, ordering a sparkling water before even glancing at me. I smiled. "Thank you for coming. I really appreciate your input. Marcus always says you have flawless taste." Her red lips curved into a smirk. "He says that, does he?" I nodded, eyes wide. "He really admires you." She leaned back, arms crossed, clearly enjoying herself. "You're very sweet, Olivia." I reached for my planner. "I've narrowed it down to 2 themes for the flower displays. One is all calla lilies and white orchids. The other includes wisteria. But I heard from the florist that you prefer lilies." Vivien cut in smoothly. "Olivia, you don't need to do all this." I tilted my head. "All what?" She removed her sunglasses. Her eyes were cold and clear. "Pretend." My fingers froze over my notes. Vivien leaned forward slightly, her tone low but unmistakably smug. "You know, I actually told Marcus to come clean months ago. But he thought you'd fall apart. He didn't want the guilt." "Guilt? From Marcus? That was rich." "He thought you'd be too fragile," she went on. "And now it's all gotten so messy. But it's okay. He'll handle it." I blinked, letting my mouth part in just enough shock to seem genuine. "You and Marcus?" Her expression said everything. I sat back, slow and stunned. "Wow. I didn't know." She offered a smile, dripping in condescension. "It's nothing personal. You're lovely. But you were always temporary. Some people build. Some people decorate. Marcus needs a builder." "And you're the builder?" I asked quietly. "I'm the future," she said. I let a pause stretch between us like a wire. Then I smiled faintly just enough. I guess that makes sense. Vivien seemed almost disappointed. I think she expected tears. A scene. Maybe even a slap. Instead, I closed my planner and said, "Thank you. I really needed the clarity." She nodded, satisfied. And just like that, she'd handed me her confession, wrapped in lilies and arrogance. I met Emma and Zara later that day at a corner bar in Soho. Emma had already reviewed the audio recording from the lunch. "I love that she thinks she's clever," she muttered, scrubbing through the clip. "She's basically narrating the con." Zara had already drafted cease and desist documents, public disclosure statements and statements of claim. "Everything's almost ready," she said. "We just need the last piece." "The party," I said. "It'll be the perfect scene." That night, back in the apartment, Marcus was already waiting with a new bottle of wine and takeout from my favorite Thai place. "You've been glowing lately," he said, rubbing my shoulders. "Everything okay?" I turned to face him, letting my expression soften. "I just feel lucky," I said. He grinned. "You're going to be the most beautiful bride." "I hope so," I murmured, brushing hair from my face. "By the way, Vivien had great ideas for the flower arrangements." He froze just slightly. "You met her?" I nodded. "Today. She was so helpful." He kissed my cheek. "That's great." Later that evening, I pulled the wedding dress from the closet. It was silk. Custom cut. Shimmering in soft ivory under the dim light. I stood in front of the mirror, holding it up against me. Not because I planned to wear it, but because I needed to say goodbye to something. Not the dress. Not the man. But the version of me who'd imagined this life with him. The girl who said yes under the stars in Santorini. The woman who'd pressed her lips to his knuckles when he was promoted. The one who believed that love, real love, could survive anything. That woman was gone. She died the day I found that necklace. I boxed the dress carefully, folding the silk like a shroud. Then I drove it across town to my mother's house, the land they'd tried to steal. I hung it in my childhood closet, closed the door, sat on my old bed and stared out the window. I didn't cry. There were no tears left for this part of the story. I stared at my reflection in the bedroom mirror and thought, I'm not mourning the relationship. That grief burned away with the first lie. What I'm mourning is the woman who believed in it. The skyline terrace shimmered under the weight of too much money and too little truth. Crystal chandeliers suspended under a transparent canopy. White roses twisted up marble pillars. Champagne fountains glittering like liquid gold under strategically placed lights. Marcus had spared no expense. Of course he hadn't. It wasn't his money anymore. I was supposed to arrive by 6 o'clock. I showed up at 6:32. And I wasn't wearing white. I stepped out of the car in a crimson gown that clung like a promise broken on purpose. The silk caught every flash of light, every camera click, every pair of widening eyes. Guests turned. Whispers rippled. A few smiled tightly, confused. One woman gasped. Marcus stood near the entrance, posing for photographs. His expression faltered when he saw me. For a moment, something primal flickered in his eyes. Shock? Anger? A crack in the mask? Then the cameras found us and his arm slipped around my waist. "You're late," he whispered through a smile. "I was worth the wait," I replied sweetly, letting him kiss my cheek for the flashing lenses. His fingers dug into my hip just slightly before relaxing again. The night unfolded like theater. Marcus guided me through the crowd like a man leading his prize mare through auction. "Stunning as always," one investor said. "I love the bold choice of red," another added, though her voice had a question mark on the end. I smiled at them all. I posed for photos. I touched Marcus's arm and laughed at all the right moments. I was Olivia Wellington tonight. But not the way they thought. Emma moved silently through the crowd, dressed in catering black, a tray in one hand and a hidden camera pinned to her apron. Zara stood near the bar, speaking casually with a city council member, her clutch filled with documents and warrants. Our journalist guests were in place, ready to film. Vivien arrived late, of course, wearing emerald green and a smile that dripped self-satisfaction. Her hand rested lightly on Gerald Reynolds's arm. I walked straight up to them. "Vivien." I beamed. "You look stunning. Emerald's so flattering on you." She blinked. "Thank you. Red is bold." "It is, isn't it?" I said, letting the words drip like champagne. Marcus always said I looked best in red. Said it made me unforgettable. She smiled tightly. Gerald extended his hand. You've outdone yourself. Quite the celebration. I shook it. The Reynolds family is always worth impressing. He raised a glass. To your future. I clinked mine against his. Oh, you have no idea. When it was time for speeches, Marcus took the mic. He tapped his glass, a practice gesture, and waited as the music dimmed and the crowd gathered closer. I just want to thank everyone for being here tonight, he began, his voice perfectly modulated. Olivia and I, we're so lucky to be surrounded by friends, colleagues, and future partners. I stood just behind him, my fingers grazing the necklace in my clutch. Vivien's necklace. Marcus continued, oozing sincerity. This woman beside me, she's my heart. The missing piece to my puzzle. The reason I wake up every morning grateful. Guest sighed. Applause sprinkled the air. He turned to hand me the mic. I took it with a smile. Thank you, Marcus, I said, turning to the crowd. And thank you all for celebrating our love tonight. I let my gaze drift across the room, over investors, journalists, city officials, the Reynolds clan. Love, I said, is built on honesty, trust, shared purpose. And so, in that spirit, I want to share something honest with all of you. Emma moved quickly. Lights dimmed. The massive screen behind us, originally meant to loop romantic photos of Marcus and me, suddenly flickered. And then, truth. The crowd gasped as the first image flashed on screen. A message from Marcus to Vivien. Once she signs, we're in the clear. Transfer the land. Move her mom out. Clean break. Then, a photo of Marcus and Vivien kissing in the Napa resort. An email from Gerald Reynolds. Miller parcel is the linchpin. Pressure the girl if she resists. Then, bank statements. Photos of falsified surveys. The honeymoon booking with Vivien's name as the bride. The gasps turned into murmurs. Murmurs into outrage. I held up the necklace, the same one I found in Marcus's drawer, and turned it slowly to show the engraving. Vivien. She was never the mistress, I said calmly. She was the plan. And then I threw it. Vivien caught it barely. The crowd exploded. Marcus lunged forward. You stupid little. Security intercepted him before he could reach me. Gerald stepped in, his voice firm. This is clearly a fabrication. A woman scorned. A vendetta. I raised my hand, silencing the room. Play the audio, I said to Emma. A recording crackled to life. Gerald's voice filled the venue, unmistakable. If she won't sign, then we pressure the mother. Accidents happen to stubborn old women all the time. Gasps. Shouts. Journalists scrambled. Flashbulbs popped. Zara was already handing folders to waiting legal observers near the exits. I walked across the stage, past Marcus, past Gerald, past Vivien, whose face was pale and frozen, to the ceremonial fire pit in the center of the venue. Marcus had insisted on it weeks ago, calling it a symbol of eternal flame. Fitting. I removed my engagement ring, the 3-carat family heirloom, and held it up to the light. For 5 years, I said, I believed in a life that was never real. I thought this ring was a promise. But it was just a cage. I dropped it into the flames. The metal hissed as it met fire. Some things, I said clearly, need to burn before we can rebuild. And then I walked away. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. Let the ashes fall where they may. Because this wasn't the end of the story. It was only the beginning. I didn't go home after the party. I went to the apartment Emma had helped me secure under a different name. Olivia Miller, the name I was born with, the one I'd left behind to become someone else's perfect partner. It was a quiet corner unit in a modest brick building in the East End, with creaky floors and windows that stuck halfway open. But the keys were mine. The lease was mine. No joint accounts. No shared contracts. No marble countertops. Just space. Just silence. Just me. The next morning I woke to my phone vibrating like a trapped insect. 6 missed calls. 9 new voicemails. Over 40 unread texts. I didn't even need to open them to know. The fire had caught. I turned on the TV. News anchors were practically breathless. A stunning scandal rocked the city last night during what was meant to be a high-society engagement party between financier Marcus Wellington and art curator Olivia Blake. Exclusive footage shows a public takedown involving embezzlement, insider trading and allegations of land fraud involving the Reynolds development empire. Here's the audio recording in question, allegedly of CEO Gerald Reynolds discussing threats toward an elderly woman. By noon, Wellington Capital's website was offline. By 4, their offices were surrounded by reporters and irate clients. By 6, I had a fresh bouquet of white roses outside my new apartment with no note, just a courier in a black cap who refused to say who sent it. I left them on the landing. Let them wilt. Emma arrived with takeout and wine. "You're on the cover of every news tabloid and financial blog in the country," she said, setting her laptop on the table. "And guess who just went into emergency meetings with the city ethics board?" She tapped the screen. Gerald Reynolds, red-faced and blinking under a flurry of questions. A reporter shouted, "Did you threaten to force a disabled woman off her land?" Another, "Were you aware Marcus Wellington was using marriage as a tool for land acquisition?" Zara called minutes later. "We've officially filed the first class action against Reynolds Development. 14 plaintiffs from Site 27 have joined." My voice cracked a little. "Thank you." "No," she said firmly. "Thank you for giving them a platform. And teeth." By midweek, Marcus tried to reach me directly. Calls, texts, even a voice memo that started with, "You misunderstood everything. Please just let me explain," and ended in something like a plea and something more like a threat. I didn't respond. I didn't even listen past the first sentence. I had nothing more to say to the man who nearly sold off my past for a penthouse future with someone else. 3 days later, he showed up at the museum. He must have known where I'd be. The exhibit I'd curated on contemporary grief opened that week. A feature wall bore the name Miller in small brass type. I didn't know he was there until security buzzed my office. "There's a man refusing to leave the lobby," the guard said. "He says he knows you." I peeked through the blinds. Marcus, rumpled, jaw tight, pacing like a caged animal. A crowd had formed. Someone pulled out a phone. "Let them film. Let them see." I didn't go down. I didn't send a message. Security escorted him out, and I stood by the window until he vanished into a swarm of flashbulbs and humiliation. The man who used to run boardrooms now couldn't even get past the lobby of my world. I went home that night and sat on the floor, surrounded by paint chips and catalogs for non-profit filing services. Emma's article was live. Zara's case was gaining traction. And I, for the first time in years, was free to decide what came next. I drove to my mother's house the following morning. The property was quiet, a little overgrown, a little wild, but beautiful. Her nurse waved from the porch. My mother sat under the arbor, blanket over her legs, sunlight pooling across her lap like gold. I sat beside her. We didn't speak for a while. Then she reached for my hand. "I saw the news," she said softly. "Everyone did. I didn't mean for it to be so public." He squeezed my fingers. "Your father would have made it louder." I laughed then, the sound surprising both of us. "I'm sorry," I whispered. She shook her head. "For what?" "For being brave. For taking back what's ours." Tears threatened, but I didn't let them fall. Not here. Not in the garden my father built. That evening I opened a document titled, "The James Miller Foundation. Mission: to protect the rights of families impacted by predatory development and corporate negligence." I submitted the paperwork before midnight. The next morning my inbox had responses from 4 donors and 3 victims groups. The fire had spread. But I was already gone. As I walked through the market that afternoon, a headline caught my eye on the newsstand. "Wellington Reynolds' Empire Crumbles." Marcus's face was on the cover. Eyes wild, shirt wrinkled, mouth half open like someone who didn't understand the rules of the game had changed. I didn't buy the paper. I didn't need to read the story. I'd written the ending myself. The news came in waves, like the slow undoing of a tightly wrapped lie. Reynolds Development was hemorrhaging investors. The stock had dropped another 20% in a single week. Anonymous sources, carefully planted by Emma, were feeding journalists damning documents implicating Gerald Reynolds in cover-ups, safety violations and bribery. And Marcus? He was crumbling faster than the empire he tried to build atop my name. Without me to play the perfect partner, the respectable face of his next move, the threads began to unravel. The museum board issued a statement distancing themselves from our engagement. Donors pulled out. Clients followed. His charm, once magnetic, now repelled under the glare of exposure. Emma sent me a message on Tuesday morning. Iris just resigned from Wellington Reynolds. She joined the rival firm that refused to work with Marcus. Guess loyalty has its limits. I stared at the message for a while. Then I smiled. That evening I walked through the garden we'd built behind my mother's house. The same land Marcus once called expendable. The oak tree we planted during the memorial now stood taller than I remembered. Stronger. The wind picked up. A familiar car pulled into the driveway. My stomach didn't drop. My heart didn't race. I just stood still. Marcus stepped out looking like a man half drowned. His once crisp suit was wrinkled and dark at the sleeves. His face, usually carefully groomed, bore stubble and shadows. The Marcus I'd known had always been polished. This man was wrecked. "Olivia," he said, voice hoarse. I said nothing. I didn't know where else to go. I glanced toward the door. "You could have tried anywhere else." He stepped closer, hands trembling. "I messed up. I know that. But everything's falling apart. My firm, my name, people won't even take my calls." My arms stayed folded across my chest. He searched my face, desperate. "I thought we could talk." "Talk?" I tilted my head. "Now that Vivien left you, your accounts are frozen, and your empire is turning to dust?" He flinched. "You came back because everything is falling apart," I said quietly. "Not because you love me." He dropped to his knees on the gravel path, voice cracking. "I do love you. I didn't know how badly until I lost you. I was stupid. Greedy. Please. Olivia, forgive me. It might have been dramatic once. Cinematic. Now it just looked small." "Get up," I said calmly. "You're embarrassing yourself." He looked up, stunned. I took a step forward, only to look him in the eye. "You don't get to beg now. Not after what you did. You tried to buy your future with my blood. My family's pain. And now that your kingdom is collapsing, you come back to the one person you thought you could still control." "I'm not trying to control anything. You always were, Marcus. You just did it with smiles and gifts and plans that never included me, only what I could give you." I let out a breath. "But the thing is, I've changed. I'm not the woman who said yes under the Santorini sky. That version of me died when I found her name on the necklace." He was silent now. I turned and walked toward the porch. Halfway up the steps I looked back. "Don't come here again," I said. "Not unless you're ready to stand trial. Or plant flowers." And then I closed the door. That night I didn't cry. I painted instead, an old canvas I'd never finished. Red. Smoke. Gold edges. I let the colors bleed like the last traces of my anger, turning it into something that no one could take away. The woman who burned her engagement ring in a fire pit? She wasn't mourning anymore. She was rebuilding, from the ashes they left behind. 6 months later. There's a bookstore beneath my apartment. I found it on my second day after moving in. A small brass plaque out front, easily missed if you weren't looking for it. Rivers and Ink. Inside it smells like paper and rain and old wood. Floor-to-ceiling shelves stretch up like trees. Dust motes drift through shafts of afternoon light. There's no soft jazz, no curated playlist. Just silence and the occasional creak of a wooden ladder sliding along rails. The man behind the counter doesn't say much. His name is Daniel Rivers, though I only learned that after 3 visits. He has silver at his temples, hands stained with ink, and the kind of stillness that doesn't feel heavy, just present. He doesn't ask questions. Doesn't compliment my smile or ask what I'm reading or tell me I look tired. Just lets me be. That was new. That was everything. I started stopping by often. Some days after foundation meetings. Some days after long phone calls with lawyers or donors or survivors. Some days after I'd visited the garden. Daniel never asked why I came. And I never had to explain. One rainy afternoon I brought him tea. "I wasn't sure how you take it," I said, handing over the cup. "Hot," he said with a soft smile. "This is perfect." I sat in the worn velvet armchair by the front window. My jeans were damp at the hem. My sweater was flecked with paint. I'd spent the morning helping my mother repaint the fence she'd once thought too damaged to salvage. Daniel didn't comment on the paint. Or the fatigue in my shoulders. He just handed me a book, dog-eared diaries. War fragments from forgotten places. I think this one might speak to you, he said. For a while we read in silence. The rain tapped the windows like an old song. A cat I hadn't seen before wandered between us, curling near the heater without ceremony. Somewhere deep in the store a grandfather clock ticked softly. Then Daniel's voice broke the stillness. He read a line aloud, his tone calm even. The fire doesn't only destroy, it reveals what can survive it. I looked up. Our eyes met. Something softened. But not toward him, toward the world. Toward myself. I used to think I lost everything in the fire, I said after a moment, my voice barely more than a whisper. He didn't say anything. He just waited. Patient. Unafraid of the silence. I let out a slow breath. But now I think, maybe I found something too. Daniel nodded. Maybe that's what the fire is for. I smiled a little. I don't know what comes next. You don't need to. I'm not ready, I said. Not for anything more than this. Not for anyone else yet. I know, he said. And there was no disappointment in it. No expectation. Just truth. I'm still learning how to be mine again, I added. You're doing a good job, he said, setting the book down gently. For what it's worth. We stayed there until the rain slowed. 2 people. Not broken. Not beginning. Just still. Outside, the street glistened, every light reflected twice. The bookstore glowed behind me as I stepped into the dusk, the bell above the door clicking softly in my wake. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. Because this chapter wasn't about burning bridges. It was about planting roots. And I was finally growing again. The end.